So we've been looking at this sunset animation, and last time we looked at the bird flapping as a simple rotor spline, and now we're going to look at particle systems. So here's the rotor shape we had before, and now let's start adding a particle system. So we're going to need a P emitter, which doesn't render by itself, so you're going to need a particle system, and you're going to need a P render tool. And now initially, actually these particles are 3D, so we only need a 2D simulation, so we're going to turn the P render to 2D. Now you see that you have these little dots. So in this first part I'm just going to go through some of the settings in the particle system. So we have the P emitter, and we have the controls which do velocity, rotation, and the number of particles. We have sets, which we're not going to worry about for the moment. We have style, which is basically the shape of each individual particle, so we can have like a big star, make that bigger, like 1, and there's various shapes you can choose from, and we are going to use what's called a bitmap eventually, but let's just practice with these dots first. And then the region, this is where the particles are emitted from, and at the moment they're emitted from this circle, so we can change the size of the circle like that. We can pick a different shape, and we're going to pick a rectangle. So let's adjust the width of it, something like that will do. And then the next thing is to adjust the number of particles. So at the moment they're created continuously at this rate, 10 particles every frame, and we don't want that, so we're going to animate this. So we're going to turn on animate by right clicking, choosing animate, and frame 1 will have 10, and then frame 2 we'll set this to 0. So now 10 particles are created on the first frame, and then after that it stops, giving us a constant number. In fact, we can go back to frame 1, we can change the number of particles like that. So the next thing is we're going to look at speed of the particles, and we use obviously the velocity control here. So changing the velocity, we'll shoot them off to the side like that, and we can change the angle of that. Ooh. But actually we do want them travelling from left to right, so let's just pick a velocity number for the moment. And you can see that makes the particles travel. We can vary the velocity to get a sort of spread of motion like that. That's too much, so we can just keep tweaking until we get something we're happy with. No, maybe a bit less. Probably something like maybe 0.1 will do. Yeah, that'll do. And we can also have a bit of an angle spread as well, so just change angle variance surfaces slightly. Yeah, something like that. So it's a pretty dull motion at the moment. So let's wire in our birds. So I'm going to choose now, we're going to choose a style which is called bitmap. And we're going to wire it into the emitter like that. And there's our birds moving. We can change the size of the birds by using the size control, so let's shrink them down a bit. Like that. Now you can see they only flap once, which isn't particularly realistic. So we're going to use something called a add, and it's in miscellaneous. We're going to add a time stretcher. So I'm going to hold down Shift and just drag it onto that line to wire it in. Now if I just view that by itself, what you can see now is I've actually frozen the animation. So I'm going to choose an interpolation time of nearest, and we're going to actually animate this source time. That's the key to getting this to work. Now it comes with a keyframe on by default, but we're going to remove that. So we're going to right click and we're going to remove time stretch source time. And what we're going to replace it with is a modifier with a wave modifier. And we're going to pick saw. And I'm going to choose 15 and 15. And turn off limit. And we get that. And now I'm just going to preview this in the spline editor so you can see what's happening. So turn off that, and I'm going to turn on the time stretcher and view the source time. So what you can see is we have a period which is 15 frames, which is this length, the horizontal length as it were. So every 15 frames the saw wave will output a value which is equal to this strength. So the value starts at 0 and goes up to 15. Now as it happens, that's now fed into our source time. So what this means is at frame 8 we'll have a value of 8 in fact, and that'll be fed into source time, and we'll choose frame 8 of our polyspline animation, and then that will repeat, so that we'll have 0 to 15 over 0 to 15 over 0 to 15 and again and again and again, and that will create our looping animation like that. So let's see what that looks like in the emitter. Interesting. That is because we have nothing at frame 0. So I'm just going to offset this by 1. And then we'll have another look at that. There we go, that's better. So the birds aren't disappearing now. Right then. Now, but however, they are all flapping at the same time, which is not particularly realistic either. So we need to do something about that. Now, quite often you'll need to pre-generate frames. So you need to have kind of an initial kind of random setup for your particles before they appear on screen. So we're going to use the pre-generate frames. This will do some calculations before the actual timeline starts, and we're actually going to choose the length of the animation, 15. And you can see that now we've got a massive volume full of little birds, because for 15 frames we've been generating birds at a rate of 20 per frame. So actually we want to turn that off, so we want to turn that down, and we're just going to have 2 birds generated every frame. So back to something like where we were before, and then what we have to do is we're going to change the animation. I'm going to set it to particle age. So what's happening is it's looking at the age of the particle, and it's using that as its start time. So because all these particles have been generated at different times off screen, as it were, they're now all starting their flapping animations at different frames. And it looks like that. And possibly the last thing to do is you just need to go back into, so you can see that they're popping off right at the end. Ding, 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 ding. And that's because their lifetime is set to 100. And we have 100 frames of animation, which should be okay. However, because we're starting things 15 frames earlier, the earliest birds are disappearing at the end of the animation. So we're just going to increase the lifespan to 200, and that should cure all those issues. There we go. So now we have our flapping birds all sliding across the screen. So we'll stop the video there, and then in the next part we'll look at forces on the particle system. We'll try and get some sort of more interesting motion.